again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scandal, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. Hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again.
What people do in no money, what people at you, in no at you. Could be money, miss away in the yellow rat you. Use the youth, the money, waste and bust a man to statue. Say me like a cashew, but bigger than a figure you. Take this skin from money, girl, and say that is not you. One day the man above end up, him a got a too much it in the kitchen, some a fly by like a patu. When singers and DJs and social media's coming at you.
It burn me
300% free.
It burn me
Garbage pile up the day.
It burn me
Give the teacher them raise.
It burn me
I see corruption peace.
It burn me
Mash down the people them house.
It burn me
Every day appear arms out.
It burn me
Appear money them a thief.
It burn me
And them a sell out the beach.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scandal, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again.
For me say big up all the charities and all of the givers. Some a go like say them powerful, me no make a bigger. The 100 the promises, none of them not deliver. Cut up the youth, they rap and they down in our fever. Member bowl money and they lie them tell. Corruption smell and they pocket them swell. When police don't a market like Satan out of hell, go mash up people start like thief when them sell.
It burn me
Or they treat the market man.
It burn me
Or them a treat the cat man.
It burn me
Or they treat the peanut man.
It burn me
Or them a treat the dirt man.
It burn me
Or them a treat the son man.
It burn me
Or them a treat policeman.
It burn me
How them a treat soldier man.
It burn me
How them a treat everyone.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scandal, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again.
Boom! I mean, I say a couple to the flex they represent for Wayne Global TV. There. So I say, you know the code, you know, Wayne Global TV is what fully blessed on 90 days. So I say, yeah man, to the fullest. Yeah man, make sure them log in to Wayne Global TV. So I say, check it out. So I say, one cup of flex. So I say, Wayne Global. When you watch you know, feel my plan up and I try to put them on the pan we head. But man, I live too long, them want Wayne Global fitted. To him juggle so smooth that them want him life for dread. I throw the bank, I like the break, but we ain't all about the bread. We open up in the ears and no listen when we said, cause we lyrics them so smooth like the linen on the bed. Them one with a fall, we live in pan the edge, I must say true, we make this them. We in Global TV, we are 90, and 90. Who Jaja bless, say no man can curse. Give it the Range Rover, who no drive yours. Boom! We in Global TV to the fullest one cup of excellence, see me?
Good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It is Sunday, the 4th of February. We are 22 days from going to the polls. And this tonight in one of our election campaign series, 2024 Jamaica Decide Local Government. Tonight, we will be looking at those who regularly assault us, those who regularly attack us. But we will get into them one by one and how they attack us and on what area they attack us. We will also be asking, is the economy of the parish of Portland under attack? More specifically, is the constituency of East Portland, the lush green, pretty beaches, fertile lands, rich tourist resort environment of Portland, East Portland, is East Portland. Beautiful rivers. Is the economy of East Portland under attack? That is one of the questions we will also ask tonight. But before I do, I want to say good evening to everyone who is here. Good evening to those on the X, those on Twitch, on Facebook, on YouTube. Good evening and welcome. We won't be back on TikTok until about the 8th of February. So thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you all for joining us. How was your weekend? Did you have a lovely weekend? And are you looking for a fruitful working week ahead? Good evening to Debbie Jervis. Good evening and welcome. Good evening to Anthony R. Good evening and welcome. All in Forrester. Good evening and welcome. Natalia Freeman Beaton Teach. Good evening and welcome. VM. Patricia Matthews. Professor Gorgeous Lady, good evening and welcome. Amazing Grace, good evening and welcome. Sunshine, good evening and welcome. JamericanTV.com, good evening and welcome. Good evening, Arlene Foster. Good evening and welcome. Nifty Friend, good evening and welcome. Izzy Holder, good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Joan Brown. Douglas Allen, good evening and welcome. Lady Janice, good evening and welcome. Noreen Dennison, good evening all, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening on Global Television. Head Teacher K, good evening and welcome. How are you? Good evening. Who else is here? BCA Sims, good evening and welcome. Good evening to all. Thank you all for joining us. Muhammad Smith, good evening and welcome. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Jerome Berry, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining. Good evening all. Thank you. Anna T, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining. Sharon Powell, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Thank you all. Good evening, welcome, and thank you all for joining. We will be looking at a group of people who regularly assault us. How they assault us. What process do they assault? What institution they assault? But before we go into that, one of my globalists, Perspective Power, good evening and welcome. One of my globalists asked me to address something that the shameful, bewildered Prime Minister has said. While being at the Montego Bay Convention Center last Thursday evening, in his bid to Jamaicans, to tell them why he should continue lead, the Prime Minister said several things. The Prime Minister said several things. But among them, when the Prime Minister was doing his soul searching, among the things the Prime Minister said, when the Prime Minister was doing his soul searching as to why he wants to lead this country, you know what the Prime Minister went to? The usual, the past, the old long time thing. Carl Texashade, good evening and welcome. Good evening. The old long time thing. The Prime Minister went right back to the old story. We've all heard it before, Prime Minister. We've all heard it before. Among the tantamount of gibberish, failure, narrative, lies that the Prime Minister could come up with. I am your child, he said. I am your son. I am your brother. Hey, your uncle. I could be your father. You, all of you out there are my family. He's speaking to the Jamaican masses. All of you. The lot, I could be brother of. The lot, I could be father of. I am a son of a lot of you. That makes me your family. That, the Prime Minister says, make me your family. Of course, it's true to say we do have a lot of wicked facts. Oops, that word I got terrible, we should say. Philip Martin, good afternoon and welcome. Philip Martin, it's for the nation to judge. It is for me to analyze. It is for the nation, Philip, to judge. It is for me, Philip, to analyze. I won't judge. I will just analyze. But the Prime Minister said, I am your brother. I am your child. I am your son. I am your uncle. I could be your father. Therefore, I am your family. The Prime Minister went on. I was shaped by the mental and political atmosphere growing up. I was shaped by the mental and political atmosphere of the inner city when I was growing up. One won't dispute that. I experienced violence firsthand. I would not dispute that either, Prime Minister. Like thousands of you, I've walked to school barefoot. I have to wash and repeat my uniform. I'm not going to dispute that, Prime Minister. But are we like you? Are we like you, Prime Minister? Are we your family, Prime Minister? Are we like you, Prime Minister? I'm sure the nation would, if they are assessing, they would say, but no, me not have no wealth what me can account for. But no, I don't go around regularly assaulting the Constitution. But no, I don't place my wife in a position to assault the Parliament of the country. But no, I don't have yachts and mansions and private helicopters in St. Lucia. But no, my 19-year-olds are not directors and company and offshore companies in St. Lucia. How are we like you? How are you like us? Or how are we like you? Billions have not been missing out of the money that others give us to spend, Prime Minister. How are we like you? Exactly, MF, good evening and welcome. Who else have I seen? Precious Allen, good evening and welcome. Maxine Mathis, good evening and welcome. No, Prime Minister. No, on your wholeness. We are not like you. We haven't, on your wholeness, got undeclared wealth. We, on Your Holiness, have given away the assets, rich, asset-rich lands of Jamaica to the Republic of China. No, on Your Holiness, we are not like you. We have not given away 650 million of the NHS contributors' money to private investors to enrich themselves. No, on Your Holiness, we are not like you. We do not have undeclared wealth. We are not under investigation for illicit enrichment, on Your Holiness. No, we're not like you. No, on Your Holiness, we're not family. No, we are not like you. Lilith Foster, good evening and welcome. Yes, Philip, I'm quite serious. It's my analysis. You may come from a different angle. That's entirely fine. For cause, good evening and welcome. More shamefully, though, DQR 300, good evening and welcome. Zuma, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Sharon, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We are not like you, on Your Holiness, but shamefully, even more shamefully, the old story continued. The old story continued. Poverty to prosperity. The article is in the description area. You can read it for yourself. The shameful failed promise. As I said the other day, the Prime Minister doesn't at all look enthusiastic about calling the election. Mikey Jones, good evening and welcome. Doesn't look at all enthusiastic about calling the election. Exactly, FM, good evening and welcome. Doesn't look enthusiastic. Because why? The Prime Minister came back. The Prime Minister came back with a failed promise of 8 years ago. The minimum of the Prime Minister's promise 8 years ago. To date, I'm not aware of a white paper that sets out the government intention. Breezer TV, good evening and welcome. For a fixed term date election, nor a green paper where the government put out a public consultation of how he's going to implement the fixed election date. To date, the Prime Minister failed to implement his 100-day policy. Regardless of how the London Times or the Miami Herald is going to prop up the Prime Minister for whatever cushy deal he's in with them, to say how well the economy of Jamaica is doing, or to say how well the economy of Jamaica has bounced back since the lockdown. The people on the ground, Prime Minister, London Times or Miami Herald, it's just not having that experience. Post Melons, good evening and welcome. The people on the ground, Prime Minister, it's just not having. Oh, wow, there's a lot of people over on Twitch tonight. Thank you very much to those on the Twitch for being here tonight. There's a few people conversating over on the Twitch. Thank you very much for being here, regardless of your opinion on views. Your opinion on your views are pretty much welcome here, as long as you are not disrespectful or discriminatory. Your views are welcome. But thank you to those on Twitch, on the X, who are here and is communicating. For those on the X, your communication will not appear in the chat here. StreamYard doesn't allow that yet, but thank you all for those who've been here and is in the comment area. But shamefully, the Prime Minister came back with the promise of poverty to prosperity. Earl Allen, good evening and welcome. At this stage, 8 years, after 8 years of the helm, an incumbent government should be able to point to their successes, not just one. Because the only positive argument that Andrew Holness seems to have to advance is the economy bounce back narrative. That's the only argument he seemed to be relying on, how well he has done on the economy. But has the people on the ground really feel what the Prime Minister, London Times, and Miami Herald is talking about? Don't even go down the road of asking the Prime Minister of his promise and performance and crime. Don't ask the Prime Minister about his performance, his promise and his performance and crime. The Prime Minister came back to the nation. The Prime Minister came back to the nation with poverty to prosperity. The Prime Minister came back to the nation. I grew up hard knocks. Elijah B, good evening and welcome. I grew up hard knocks. I had the one khaki shirt and the one khaki pants, but they have barefoot. Sleep on floor. Rough and tumble off the inner city street just to make it to go to school. A lot of those prime ministers who you are saying you are their brother, you are their friend, family, you're all like them. They have paid back their student loan, Prime Minister. Have you? They have paid back their student loan, Prime Minister. Have you? You were Prime Minister just last year, referred to Prime Minister for corruption prosecution. Just last year. You, Prime Minister Andrew Holness, was referred to for corruption prosecution. We, Andrew Holness, are not like you. We are not like you. We don't embezzle the public purse. We are not able to account. We're not unable to account for the budget of the public purse, Andrew Holness. We're not able. We weren't the one, Andrew Holness, who signed off a secret shoddy deal in efforts to recoup the 650 million. With one straw and a spider web profit, Andrew Holness. And you and Martin Miller signed off a secret deal. So we don't know how much of our money wasted, where if our money was that 650 million, if it was invested by the government in a housing scheme, in a rundown inner city area, how much it could have benefited Jamaicans rather than your private investor friends. We are not like you. I'm not telling people to believe your promises or not. I'm not telling people to dismiss your poverty to prosperity narrative. That's not my job. My job is to ask them, Prime Minister, assess for yourself across all walks of the country and see if you have enjoyed any of that prosperity. Have that prosperity arrived at your home? Have it arrived in your community, your division, your constituency? Have you seen that prosperity across your country? No, we are not like you, on your wholeness. It is for Jamaicans when they're going to the poll to ask themselves, am I benefiting from this prosperity? Am I benefiting from this prosperity? What I have seen over the last 8 years, does that encourages me to say that we are on the right path? And we should continue on that path, because we're definitely on the right journey with good leadership. It is for the people to assess when they go to the poll. But will the people vote usually on party line? Will the people wake up to the politics and vote? DRIVETIME, good evening and welcome. Vote on the future of your children, but not on the failed, repeated promises. So that was just my response to what the Prime Minister have said. Patricia, good evening and welcome. That's just my response to what the Prime Minister has said in relation to his speech at the Montego Bay Convention Center last Thursday evening. And this was pointed out to me over the weekend by one of my globalists. So that's my response to the Prime Minister, telling us he's one of us, he's our brother, he's our uncle, father, family. Stacy, good evening and welcome. And therefore, he has searched his heart. And because he has realized that he's one of us, but Andrew Holness may not done with you yet, because no, Andrew Holness, we are not one, we are not like you. Because you see, Andrew Holness, you don't have to decide which of your children to send to school today and which to send tomorrow. No, Andrew Holness, we are not like you. We are not lying on the floor in hospitals for days or hours and weeks waiting for a bed. No, Andrew Holness, we are not like you. We are not dying at the hospital with misdiagnosis, negligence, and lack of care. No, Andrew Holness, we are not like you, because even though healthcare is so run down and shoddy, we cannot afford the services. No, Andrew Holness, we are not like you. Monica Willis, good morning, good evening, and welcome. But I'm going to turn my attention to the attackers. I'm going to go back to Andrew Holness, because we are not like you, Prime Minister. And I'm going to continue to remind you that no, Prime Minister, we are not like you. We know how the Hope has stolen something, drop the purse. We know how the Hope has something them are run around with like you. I'm going to look on those those who regularly assault us and how they do. Those who assault us, the attackers. Oops, official. Good evening and welcome. I'm going to start with the Prime Minister. How does the Prime Minister attack us? Regularly assaulting our Constitution. The Prime Minister has regularly assaulted and attacked our Constitution. State of emergency, Zozo, dead of night legislation, extending the DPP tenure beyond her 60th birthday, which is unconstitutional. Doris Leicester, good evening and welcome. As well as Jamaican Carlos. How are you, my brother? Good evening and welcome. Carlos always round with the 2x4, knocking out knees and elbows and all that. Welcome, my brother, welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, as always. The Prime Minister, we're looking at those who regularly assault and attack us. And we're looking at the Prime Minister who regularly assault our Constitution. Zozo, state of emergency, extending the DPP tenure after her 60th birthday without consulting the opposition. The Prime Minister even went further after he was challenged in court over that very issue. The Prime Minister went further into a dead of night legislation before they went off to their recess to increase the life of the DPP beyond what the present constitution said in the middle of a constitutional review reform. Not only that, the Prime Minister went on by creating an office that is equivalent in practice to the Ministry of Justice, but in an effort to cut around the Ministry of Justice when he wants his way, or in the areas where he wants his way, regularly assault our Constitution. Not only that, as we were covering last week, the Prime Minister went to Parliament. We saw last Tuesday, the Prime Minister and Delroy Chuck went to Parliament with an assault on our legislative process. An assault on our legislative process. But before the Prime Minister did that, the body that hold Parliament, government officials, and public officials to account, the Prime Minister got rid of that office. An assault on our Constitution. Not only that, the Prime Minister distruck the office and refused to reappoint the office under the current legislation. Why do you think that? The current legislation, it would seem, give a lot of power to a person in the office of the political ombudsman, parliamentary political ombudsman. If that person is not corrupt, can really use the power that that legislation gives to hold corrupt politicians and public officials to account. We saw Donna Parchment Brown exercise that power in disciplining Pernell Charles' daughter, Michelle Charles, one of our crooked politicians, one of our hereditary politicians. Hand me down, hand me down. That was the reason for Andrew Holness destructing the office, refused to reappoint the office because he doesn't want him or his government to be held to account. An attack on our Constitution. The Prime Minister came to Parliament last Tuesday with an ill-written, ill-thought-out, half-thrown together legislation to bamboozle the Parliament and the country by extension, to take the powers of the office of the political ombudsman into the office of the Prime Minister by an 8-hour legislation. The Prime Minister is using the working day to legislate, to take the office that holds politicians into account into the office of the Prime Minister 24 hours before the Prime Minister called a local government election. A regular assault on our Constitution. A regular assault on our Constitution. That is the Prime Minister who stood at Montego Bay Convention Center last Thursday evening telling us he's one of us. He's our family. But the Constitution, the very Constitution that protects all of us, right? Elaine Tucker, good evening and welcome. The very Constitution that protects all of us, the Prime Minister busy with disregard, assault our Constitution. And then that same Prime Minister, who Dr. Campbell in his satire said has no heart, searched deeply and found out, I am like you. So that's the constitutional assault in tonight's program. We're going to look at the assault on our public purse from Dr. Nigel Clark. An assault on our public purse from Dr. Nigel Clark. Dr. Clark has the responsibility of our budget. Dr. Clark disburses from our budget. Dr. Clark is under duty. Angela 48349, good evening and welcome, is under duty to be accountable to us for our finances. Look how much of our money over the last 10 years, but we know they're responsible for 7-8 years of it. Over 700 billion, over 1.6 trillion. A lot of that out of the very Prime Minister's office. The very Prime Minister sorry. The very Prime Minister who searched his heart and never saw anywhere down there where our budget on our unexplained budget wasn't anywhere down his heart where he found out that we are like him, he's one of us. He couldn't find that down there. The 650 million. Winston Darkin, good evening and welcome. The 650 million. Delroy Henry, good evening and welcome. Giving away to his friends to develop. Dr. Clark have the overall responsibility of the country's budget. The 15 million per month to upkeep a fraudulent company who has embezzled investors' money. But before we continue, Mr. Bolt, are you a director at Supreme Ventures, Mr. Bolt? Or if not Supreme Ventures, Mr. Bolt, have you been made a director on any of these financial institutions? And if so, Mr. Bolt, is it a cover-up, quiet-up? I'm just asking. But the same Dr. Clark, who's using millions of our money to upkeep Maxine Wilson, good evening and welcome. The same Dr. Clark who's using millions of taxpayers' money to hold up a fraudulent firm. A firm who they've broke into the company under the administrators that the Financial Services Authority appointed to run the company with our money that Dr. Clark is throwing into it. That Dr. Clark said it's not our money, it's confiscated money from the proceeds of crime. But conveniently, a break-in and entry, and among the laptops that went missing, the laptop for the financial officer, the chief financial officer's laptop was among the laptops missing. Lying Dr. Clark, criminal in a tie, came back to us and tell us, oh, we just remember say SSL did have insurance, blah, 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 overcross this, and then get insurance. So SSL pay back over 11 million to investors. Show up on paper, Dr. Clark. I wonder for the same piece of dusty paper that was in your office with regards to SSL. We have dust and cobweb, which you never even take up until the story break, or when the story break, you take it up. Brush off the cobweb and the dust and look at what was said. Is that what you're expecting us to believe? Dr. Clark? Lift shot? Elijah? Is that what you're expecting us to believe? Dr. Clark regularly allow an assault on our public purse. Dr. Clark regularly allows an assault on our public purse. It was the same Dr. Clark. Mary Messenger, good evening and welcome. It was the same Dr. Clark under the tenure of Dr. Clark as our treasurer, as our Minister of Finance. It is the same Dr. Clark that assaulted our public purse by giving 300% pay rise to incompetency. It was the same Dr. Clark department who gave 300% pay rise to incompetency. That same Dr. Clark, a regular assault on our public purse. Dr. Clark, who continued to tell us that foreign investigator, 1 minute is the FBI, 1 minute is investigator from the United Kingdom. Who is really investigating SSL? Is there really an investigation into the SSL saga? Could Gene and Panton alone successfully carry out this heist? Is it a white and black Jamaica? Is it a colorism Jamaica? Why Hugh Crosby is protected, but Gene and Panton alone is being expected to carry the can. A regular assault on our public purse from Dr. Clark, or when he's not assaulting it, Dr. Clark allowed our public purse to be assaulted. An assault on the public purse from the Ministry of Education. An assault on the public purse from the Ministry of Education. An assault from the public purse and on the public purse from both the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Finance, along with the Prime Minister. An assault on our public purse from the Prime Minister, as we learned recently. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health assaulted our public purse to the tune of $1.6 trillion. JJ, good evening and welcome. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Health, the Prime Minister's office, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education assaulted our public purse to the tune of $1.6 trillion. That was allowed by Dr. Clark. 8 years of not sorting accountability. 8 years of Dr. Clark not looking for accountability, not demanding accountability for the money that he stand in Parliament and budgeted out to different departments. Dr. Clark does not care how that money is disbursed or what is done with it. That's not what we pay Dr. Clark for. We don't pay Dr. Clark to look after our money. We just pay Dr. Clark to throw our money up in the air. To just throw money up in the air. Getting ready to go over the next Wayne platform. What do you mean by that, Anthony? Throw our money up into the air. That's what we pay Dr. Clark to do. Regularly assault on our finances. Delroy Chuck assist the Prime Minister in his assault on our legislative process. It's not only on Tuesday that Delroy Chuck did that. Delroy Chuck did it last year before they went off for summer recess. Delroy Chuck did it last year before they went off to summer recess. When they legislate, okay, thanks. When they legislate to extend the life of the DPP, that was another assault on the legislative process. Oh, I forgot that, Wayne. But I will be done. You know I'm not here for more than an hour, but some of the people I need to run through tonight, I'm going to be here for more than an hour. Delroy Chuck, a regular assault on our legislative process. He did it as recent as Tuesday gone. To lump two offices together that acts independent of government. However, the Prime Minister has already taken one under its belt. The Electoral Commission of Jamaica. It's under the Prime Minister's belt. That body that should be an independent regulator, an independent watchdog over our electoral process. The Prime Minister has already had that. And with the attempted assault on our Constitution, on our legislative process last Tuesday, Delroy Chuck and the Prime Minister intention was to take another body, another public body, which should be acting independent of government, into the Prime Minister's office, the office of the political ombudsman, which is there to hold politicians, parliamentarians, and public bodies and public officials to account. That Andrew Holness and Delroy Chuck regularly assault our legislative process in order to get what they want. Madam Shrek, regularly, we have lost count. We have lost count of the assault on our prosecutorial process. We have lost count of the assault. Like and share the life, people. You can't have me attack, breathless, hungry, thirsty, and all that jazz without even touching the thumb on the thing. Please do give us some like and share. Otherwise, we'll just sit down and look down. Or am I not saying anything that makes sense? Tell me. Am I making sense or am I not? Am I making sense before I continue on with Madam Shrek? Am I making sense or am I not making sense? Like and share the live, please. Whichever platform you're on. Whichever platform you're on. Give us some like and some shares, please. Am I making sense? Madam DPP, regular assault or prosecutorial process. Time has passed. Not enough evidence. It's not in public interest. Nzinga cutout are here. Always something. Always something. Michelle Lewis Wilson, God's gift, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Always an assault. Veteran, good evening and welcome. How are you coming like you just arrived? So wait there, you're there asleep, you're late. If you just how come you're going to have to watch from the start. Always someone attacking us. A constant attack on our prosecutorial process. We still see the ball kicking down the road. Kicking down the road with Noel Maitland. An assault on our prosecutorial process. What is stopping Paula Llewellyn and the rest of them from being ready for a trial all this time? Why Paula Llewellyn always find it possible to wait until time has passed before she moved towards any prosecution? Why Paula Llewellyn always see it possible, Vernon Adams, good evening, always see it possible to protect those in high society and in power? It was the same Paula Llewellyn on the assessment of the evidence that Fitzbailey presented from Patrick Bailey's house. Paula Llewellyn didn't see anything to charge over or to further prosecute. A regular assault on our prosecutorial process, where even when the evidence is glaring, Paula Llewellyn will bamboozle us in public in order not to prosecute. Everton Jarrett, good evening and welcome. Thank you. Thank you. We don't mind your insults if that's what you think it is. We don't. A regular assault from Paula Llewellyn, a regular assault on our prosecutorial process. This is the reason why the Prime Minister could assault the Constitution to keep Paula Llewellyn there, to continuously assault the prosecutorial process. Because as long as Paula is there, corrupt politicians and corrupt officials, we won't get to see them facing justice. So between Paula Llewellyn and Andrew Holness, Delroy Chuck is a regular assault on the justice process. Not only them, a regular assault on the investigative process by Fitzbailey. Oh God, for him track record, I go take too long to read out. Me want to scroll. For hang down Fitzbailey track record I done. You would really need a scroll to hang down Fitzbailey track record of assault on our investigative process. Up in our face. It's not like Fitzbailey do it behind my back. Up in our face. Regularly. Dr. Bloomfield, Donnelly Donaldson, Reverend Orville Moore, Melissa Silvera, Jermaine Jr., countless amount of assault on our legislative process by Fitzbailey. I'm not going to itemize them tonight. I've listed a lot of his assault on our investigative. A lot of them you are familiar of because we're always drilling them over here. A constant assault on our legislative process. But two of the major standouts with Fitzbailey is when Fitzbailey stood in front of the camera and told us they can't charge anybody for Jermaine Jr.'s death because there was no break-in and entry at Patrick's Bailey house after Jermaine Jr. was stabbed more than 20 times and was shot. And there was no break-in and entry. But nobody did it. I wonder if the police has ever spoken to Orlando Terrelong to find out if Orlando Terrelong was at Patrick's Bailey house on the night when Jermaine Jr. was murdered. A regular assault on our investigative process. Fitzbailey also stood or sat, Sonia went, good evening and welcome, looked into the camera and told us that there's no foul play in Reverend Moore's death. When Fitzbailey told us that, Fitzbailey had a post-mortem. Fitzbailey had a post-mortem report that suggests that Reverend Alvin Moore was assassinated. He was murdered. But Fitzbailey looked into the camera and told us they already suspected suicide. And that's what the post-mortem report said. And they saw no foul play. When Fitzbailey did that, the Reverend Fitzbailey, a man of God who goes on the pulpit on Sundays, When Fitzbailey told us that, Fitzbailey had a post-mortem report that says Dr. Moore. It didn't say that, but the information would lead you to know that it's an assassination. And Fitzbailey lied to us. A man of God, a man of the cloth, a regular assault. Fitzbailey, Paula Llewellyn, Delroy Chuck, the Prime Minister, a regular assault on our justice, on our justice process. A regular assault by Fitzbailey, Paula Llewellyn, the Prime Minister, and Fitzbailey on our justice process. Why me leave out Dr. Chang for so long? Because I'm coming back to Dr. Chang. How am I coming back to Dr. Chang? I'm going to link Dr. Chang back to Andrew Holness's argument about I am your brother. I am your uncle, your father, your family. Is the Prime Minister hearing voices, Dr. Chang? Because just the other day, Dr. Chang was of the view, even though an unpublished paper, if he has one, Dr. Chang was of the view that the criminal elements of Jamaica are hearing voices. If the Prime Minister, Dr. Chang, is like us, is one of us, or brother, or father, or family, would you agree then, Dr. Chang, that with a Prime Minister who cannot account for the wealth he amassed, a Prime Minister whose asset cannot be verified, a Prime Minister who's Brittany Line, good evening and welcome, a Prime Minister who millions has been embezzled from the office of the Prime Minister under his tenure. Is the Prime Minister hearing voice, Dr. Chang? Because those would be criminality. Wouldn't you agree? It's not just picking up a gun. It's criminality, Dr. Chang. Would you agree, Dr. Chang, even though we haven't seen a paper from you, but you have said that the criminal elements of Jamaica adopted a schizophrenic attitude in conflict resolution? But can we apply the voice hearing to the Prime Minister not being able to tell us what he has done with our money or where he has got his tantamount from that he cannot verify or justify? Could we apply your paper to you, Dr. Chang? Because your own JCF members are disgruntled with your gang alignment, Dr. Chang. Your illegal gun shipment, Dr. Chang. Your JCF rather, members are pretty much disgruntled with that behavior. And your top brass police, Dr. Chang. Could we apply that to you, Dr. Chang, to say that Dr. Chang and the Prime Minister is hearing voices? Because if the wider Jamaica is hearing voices in dealing with conflict resolution, could it be that our politicians, could it be, Dr. Chang, that our politicians are also hearing voices? We are not like you. In relation to the whole Melissa Silvera investigation, I don't want Mr. Bailey to think that he's going to be bought grace during this whole election period. I don't want Mr. Fitzbailey to think that we have forgotten about the Melissa Silvera investigation. There is still a lot that the public, Mr. Bailey, needs to know. There are still a lot that the police need to know with regards to the Melissa Silvera investigation. Is there an actual investigation into a cover-up? Is there anyone, Fitzbailey, under investigation for cover-up? You were doing a review into the action of the initial police who visited the Silvera resident, Fitzbailey. The public is to be updated on these issues. If you are going to control the speculation and narrative in public, one of the things that you will have to do, Fitzbailey, is truthfully, to the best you can, in not jeopardizing the case, is keeping the public informed. It is your duty. This is a state case, our investigation. And we ought to be informed. The more information that the public gets, it will limit the speculation. We need to know, Mr. Bailey, who is under investigation. If there are investigation for cover-up, and if there is, who is under investigation. We're not going to drop the Silvera issue. It's going to run concurrent with the election campaign until you decide to keep us up to date, Fitzbailey. We are going to continue to speculate, and we are going to continue to ask questions, because it is a part of our duty to do so. You all work for us. But finally tonight, I want to ask the question, is Portland under attack? Is the economy of Portland under attack? Is the vases grab and Portland destructive for Portland as a parish? The economy of East and West Portland, more particularly East, and by extension, the economy of Jamaica. Dragon Bay. Dragon Bay was from research, quite a thriving resort in the East Portland, Port Antonio town set. Quite thriving. It was the leading employer in the tourist sector in the Portland parish. The leading employer within the tourism sector. Gordon Wood Stewart acquired Dragon Bay Resort. His promise then was to spend $65 million to spruce up the thing. He was going to use $65 million to spruce up the infrastructure of Dragon Bay and get it back, get the life booming in Port Antonio. RSS 331, good evening and welcome. But rather, but rather Dragon Bay has been closed for the better part of 20 years. The economy of Port East Portland and Port Antonio has suffered immensely because of that closure. Lots of people, hundreds, were put out of employment. Dragon Bay is a 99-bedroom resort, so 99 bedroom, then you know, sir, them host a lot of guests. So there's a lot that goes on there. Is the economy of East Portland under attack? To date, the stewards have the place, as research suggests, in a ghost town, once a thriving, bustling environment, have become a ghost town. It is also said that hotel is used, Dragon Bay is used as a brothel for the queer and rich and famous. After sucking the economic life out of Port Antonio, the Sandals Group, who own hotel all over the Caribbean, over 20 years, and they couldn't or cannot get East Portland, Dragon Bay, Port Antonio back island. And this attack on the Portland economy, I am dealing specifically with Adam Stewart, Darrell Vaz, Ann Vaz, and Paul Thomas. Dragon Bay, the Stewarts own it, from them take it over. What, are you saying that Dragon Bay has closed for 24 years? 24 years. 24 years of destruction on the economy of East Portland. 24 years of destruction on the economy of East Portland. Blue Lagoon, the Stewarts are highly involved with land ownership down by the Blue Lagoon again. East Portland has been sold out to the oligarchs, to the highest bidders. Just like how Northern Jamaica's a give Jamaica for free who want peace, East Portland has been sold to the highest bidder. Blue Lagoon, the Stewart them, involved as well. And we see the closure of the Blue Lagoon under Ann Vaz, Mayor Paul Thomas, Mayor Max, by extension Darrell Vaz, who owned Portland with his purse, and whatever else tactics Darrell Vaz used to control Portland. But now it is said Adam Stewart is going after another piece of prime area. That piece of prime area, you heard Mr. Bell spoke about reviving East Portland tourist economy with a reggae park and Navy Island. It is said that Adam Stewart wants to buy Navy Island. Navy Island is in the government's ownership. Is in the government's ownership. So a Beta and teacher say it's no playground for rich, famous, for rich squares. They land there in helicopters and sailboats. So the yacht affordable society, the private jet copters and yacht society. Those are the people who they've closed Jagan Bay to have ramping shop in East Portland while the economy of East Portland suffers. While the economy of East Portland suffers, they have handed over one of the most thriving employer, what was 20 odd years ago, one of the most thriving employer in East Portland has been closed down, and it is now said to be turned into a ramping shop. But the same Navy Island that Mr. Bell wants, which is Jamaican asset, to use to develop, revive the tourist economy, revive the creative industry in East Portland. It is said that Adam Stewart, who his father crushed the economy of Port Antonio with the destruction of Dragon Bay, wants to acquire Navy Island. The question is that an attack on the economy of East Portland? That is for the voters of East Portland to answer coming this local government election. This is where Jamaica Decides ends tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. If you joined us late, you can go back to the top of the show where we respond to Andrew Holness last Thursday comment at the Montego Bay Conference Center before election was called. I am your brother. I am your uncle. I could be your father. I am your son. I am your family. And I'm saying, no, Prime Minister, we are not like you. This is where Global TV ends tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back tomorrow. We will be working on more interviews to bring you tomorrow. Thank you very much. God bless, and we will see you. Good night.